Alright, 3, 2, 1, and welcome back to the Celestial Cafe. My name is Luis.
My name is Flavio.
My name is Abraham.
Alright, and today, what are we talking about?
We're talking about relationships.
Relationships.
Relationships. Hell yeah, bro. Bane of my existence, bro. TBH.
Huh? What?
Alright, for real though, before we start, I do have a question for both of you. What is love?
Baby,
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
What is love to you, bro?
For real though, what is love?
Yes, what is love indeed? I would like to hear your guys' point of view.
What does love mean to you, Louis?
Well, here's the thing about love, right? So we've all heard that love comes in a bunch of different forms and whatever. And sure, that's true. However, I think at its fundamental, how do I know that? In its most fundamental form, love is a feeling at the end of the day. How do I know that? Because you fucking feel it. You feel love. I remember I was coming across this YouTube video in which he talked about love in a scientific sense. Now, when love is elicited, there's a bunch of processes that happen within the brain, many that are very, very similar to like opioids, for example. Very, very highly addictive drugs that elicit a certain sense of, how can I put it? They trigger the dopamine path and they release a bunch of it at a time. Now, this is important because when love is felt, it's felt strongly. There's very few things as addictive and as strong as love. So when you are off of love, it can literally feel like you're trying to fucking detox, but you're now all of a sudden coming across all those withdrawals. I mean, love withdrawals exist. We felt them. We've been there. When we're sitting in our bed alone after a breakup and shit like that, it's very, very present.
I see. What do you know about the 5 love languages?
To be honest, this is a new realm to me, so enlighten me.
Well, I'm not that familiar with the 5 love languages either, Louis. So,
damn, bro.
I mean, here's the thing. It's because if you think about it, a lot of these relationships or quote-unquote relationships aren't really relationships. Therefore, there isn't really a lot of love involved in them. But I feel like the best way to back this up is how there's so many situationships going on and how there's so many relationships that end up just not working and everybody goes, both parties just go their own ways.
Well, relevant to love, I mean, obviously, in order to express it with a romantic partner, there's a couple different stages that it has to take. So one of the books that I've read on this that's helped me a lot is Single, Dating, Engaged, Married by Ben Stewart, where basically he just talks about how love is present and how to best navigate each of those stages of a relationship. So I guess we can start talking about singleness, right? Well, I mean, before we even go there, what does it say about love? Well, here's the thing. Love is something that's it's a cultural phenomenon, right? And not even just within our culture, like everyone understands it. Everyone inherently knows what it's like to feel love. It comes from a very, very early childhood. When we're snuggled up against our parents, when we're being fed breast milk, like that's all love. Like that's all love. When we see it in pop culture, we typically see it being represented in 3 different ways. At least that's how Ben Stewart describes it. You can physically see it because love sends, love sacrifices, and love stays. Now, what does that mean? Love sends, love moves, like love will propel action, right? We all see those movies where the main character is so in love that he feels compelled to do something. Love sacrifices. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that we think about when it comes to love. Sacrificing your time, sacrificing your money, sacrificing your pride even. Some people sacrifice way too much. Some people don't sacrifice enough, but love sacrifices. And lastly, love stays. We all heard about those things of like, I will wait, right? I mean, Mumford & Sons has an entire song dedicated to that. Of, I will wait for you. I can't stand hearing that, bro. Because, yeah, I sing it because it's become so cheesy. But you know what? It's made its way into pop culture. And that's for a reason, because love stays.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think with those 3 in mind, you can definitely see when someone is in love. But that doesn't tell you if a love connection exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I feel like that's why a lot of parents and a lot of people our age as well often say that our first love is always our parents, and like the girl's first love is always her dad. The boy's first love is always her mom. I guess generally speaking, because you'll always have some bitch just come up and say, "Oh, well, I didn't have a dad, so niggas ain't shit." So I'm like generally speaking, because I do know that a lot of these girls out here grew up without a dad, so that's not always the case. But for those of you guys who were fortunate enough to have a dad present in your life, well, then you would know what I'm talking about. Vice versa for the boys. For those of you who didn't have that chance, well, what do you want me to tell you? you know, like I was gonna say something fucked up, but I'm not gonna say that. You were gonna censor that shit anyway, so I might as well just not say it.
You can. What are you gonna say? What are you gonna say? Yeah.
Nah, I'm not gonna say it. I might say it later.
You have to say it, bro. You have to say it now.
Yeah, bro. I'm gonna edit it anyway. I want to know.
I'll say it later.
Because then you're gonna forget.
Oh, no, I will.
Then you're gonna forget.
No, I will. I'll write it down. Right here.
Since you were mentioning that part about, the love being felt from our parents, that reminds me of the Oedipus complex. I'm actually going to ask Flav to tell us a little bit more about that.
The Oedipus complex?
The Oedipus complex, yes.
Wait, why would you ask
Flav? Oh, Oedipus. Yeah, low key. What the fuck? What do I have to do with that? Because what are you trying to?
You're the psychologist here. So the Oedipus complex was all right. The Oedipus complex was coined by Sigmund Freud. It's a very Freudian concept to believe that. Why am I explaining it? You're gonna explain it, Flav.
So basically, what I've come to understand about it is that, motherfucking, when a dude has this idea that, or as a kid, this is Bonnie explained it to me perfectly, and that's the way that I understood it. That's the only way that I understood it. I knew of it before, and I knew what it like entailed, but I didn't know the actual definition of it. So basically, it's like the kid, he grows up with his mom, and his first lover is his mom, but something about like the dad getting in between, and then some fucking like confusing ass shit where. Basically, it's when a dude looks for the love of the mom. That's basically what it is.
Yeah. I just want to say something. Yeah, because when he explained to me, it was something very, very similar, and it's like, I guess for me, it was something that really stuck by me. It was like one of those things that it takes you a hard time to forget, because I feel like over time, there's certain things that you'll just forget. Well, not forget completely, because as soon as somebody says it or mentions it, you'll be like, oh yeah. So for me, it has come to be one of those things. But it was one of those things that just took a while for me to forget. And it was because like when he explained it to me, everything makes sense. I remember we were talking about how I felt in regards of my parents' relationship, and how the Oedipus complex is essentially the idea that, yeah, you are looking for your mother's love in another woman, but the story talks about how Oedipus fucks his mom, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It's just the idea that as long as you continue to fight with your dad over your mother's love, you will continue to try to find your mother's love in other women or in other girls. At least that's how he explained it to me. That's what he said. I feel like he explained it based off of like the information that I was giving him, But it made a lot of sense because I'm like, oh, okay, And I wouldn't say this applies to every single one of my relationships, but it does apply to a few. And I think it has a lot to do with the whole your mom or dad being your first love. So I could see why you referred to the Oedipus complex, Luis.
A little bit of context here. Oedipus was a mythical Greek king, right? Within Greek mythology, Oedipus was a king. And the thing is, from the moment he was born, it was prophesied that would happen. It was prophesied that he would kill his father and fuck his mother. So in order to ensure that this wouldn't happen, his parents, being the good parents that they were, basically shipped him off. They were like, hey, goodbye, go kick rocks. And during all that time, Oedipus grew up and he was distant from his parents. He didn't know them. Now, eventually, Oedipus comes across a man, and when he kills him, he has no idea what the ramifications of that were. But in killing this man, he was further enacting this prophecy, because this man later turned out to be the husband. And so when Oedipus finally came to this kingdom and became king, he obviously had intercourse with his queen. However, little did he know that this person was his mother. And so that's where the prophecy came true. Because of the parents' fear of the prophecy, and because of the parents trying to avoid destiny, quote unquote, then that's why Oedipus ended up fulfilling the prophecy. Right? So there's a bunch of different life lessons that can be tied in there. But what we get out of this in regards to Sigmund Freud is this is not only a story within Greek mythos, it's actually a psychological playing out of our true desires, right? The thing about Sigmund Freud, the thing to understand about Sigmund Freud, is that he ties everything back to desire. The id, the ego, and the superego, it all has to do with desire and what human desire entails. And so Freud legitimately believes that at birth, our desire, like our sexual natural desire, is towards, if you're a man, towards your mother. And if you're a female, towards your father. And so this is where you start coming up with terms like, like penis envy and all this like sense of like jealousy that develops within the parent of the same sex. I think that's why we tend to have a lot of problems with parents of both sex, but in different ways. At least for me, the problems that I have with my mother are a lot more of feeling like I have to protect her, feeling like I have to take care of her. Whereas with my father, it's a lot more competition. It's a lot of comparison. It's a lot of measuring up. Basically, we whip each other's cocks out and measure it against each other, even though his is always going to be bigger than mine, metaphorically speaking.
Physically too, I bet.
I don't know about the physical, man. It's been a long time.
What?
Cut that out.
Hey, real talk, bro. I think bro. I think you had to walk in on your dad in the bathroom at least one time throughout.
We took showers together, bro. We took showers.
No,
together.
but I mean recently. You just had to accidentally just walk into him while he was taking a shit.
TBH.
Really?
I'm never at home.
Have you, Abraham? Or are you speaking from experience?
I have, bro. I have.
That's why he's jealous.
Nah, nigga. Nah, I admit, bro. That shit is fucking huge, bro. That shit was traumatizing, my nigga. Listen, I got, dude. I sat down and just crossed my knees and just like held my knees with my hands and just started moving back and forth, bro.
Just in the fucking corner of the room.
In the corner of the room, bro.
Damn, bro.
Hey, bro, you gotta cut this out, bro. You gotta cut this shit out, bro. You cannot have me talking about my dad's cock in here, bro.
Dude, that's content, bro. It's content.
Nah, nigga. Nah. I mean, if you want, I don't give a fuck. Yeah. Anyways, as you were saying.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too. Well, a lot of us hear all the time that, when we're looking for a relationship, when we're looking for a partner, we look for a partner through people who remind us of our parents, right? And I'm not going to say that's BS because it isn't. It's true in a lot of cases, but no one tells you why. And I think a lot of it goes back to not only desire, but the pain that's inflicted very, very, very early on in childhood. Because a lot of the times, the biggest pain that you feel is either rejection or abandonment. At least in regards to love and in regards to relationships, those are the two biggest ones.
Yep.
Rejection and abandonment.
Yep.
And when you feel either rejection or abandonment from either of your parents, it instills this desire not only to be fulfilled sexually and to be sexually satisfied, but now it's a deeper desire of looking for love and searching for love. And so between the ages that you first were able to form a conscious thought to the age of 7, that is your span of emotional exploration. if we can call it that. And after then, all of your emotions have been formed in one sense or another. Obviously, they're not fully solidified and not everything is set in stone. But what we see a lot of the times is that while we encounter different situations or while we're put in different circumstances, we continue to refer back to the same emotions that we've been developing for those past 7 years. And the reason being is because it's just simple. I think that's a lot of the times why you find like 40-year-old men acting like children when it comes to a relationship, or even in the art of seduction. Actually, Flav, do you want to explain the art of seduction in regards to the siren?
Which one?
The siren.
Because there's 3.
Hey.
The one with Emma on it.
Okay, let me resign from this.
I think it was Emily. I think it was Emily. Yeah, I think it was Emily.
There's a sex siren. The sex siren is the one who acts very innocent and very like childlike, and in some way that brings us attraction towards, or someone can find attraction towards that because of like the innocence type shit. A good example would be like Marilyn Monroe, who played up this character like innocent in like one of like her most infamous clip is the one where she's in a dress and then the air just comes up from the bottom and she's like trying to hold it down, and that kind of plays off like this innocent type of vibe. So it creates like this like form of attraction for them.
Yeah, so I think part of that goes back to what we experienced when in that early childhood, between the ages of, first having consciousness to the age of 7. A lot of these emotions, a lot of these feelings, a lot of these events keep being played out over and over again. We may encounter different situations, but we've already learned how to respond. And when it comes to the art of seduction specifically, it's a very effective way, because playing into that innocence is playing into that very, very young childhood that left a longing. So when you encounter that, it's almost impossible not to smile or not to feel something or not to feel attracted to that, because ultimately it's what you were longing for and never had.
Wait a minute. So what are you trying to say?
What I'm trying to say is that the Oedipus complex points towards something that was missing in childhood. Whether it be whatever pain was generated, whether through rejection or abandonment, it leaves a hole that's left in our childhood. And I think that's why we continue to look for our mother or our father in our partners. It's not because, you want someone to match them or you respect them or whatever. No, it's because of that pain that was felt. And it's your brain's way of rationalizing or comprehending what happened. Basically, even as adults, we still act like children when it comes to relationships, because that's all we ever knew in regards to love.
Yeah, I feel like that is very true. And then especially because like I've had an experience like that before, where my first relationship, and I never realized it before I got to the self-help group that I'm in, that in reality, in the relationship that I had, my first ever relationship, I was seeking that same love that I didn't receive from my parents, or the love and attention that I didn't receive from my parents. And when I had finally like obtained it, I tried my very best to be like the person that I needed to be I thought I needed to be that person to keep that love going on. And so in some way I would betray myself and begin to do things that I normally wouldn't, so that this person can stay with me. So I feel like that's where like the term of codependency comes into my own life, where I feel the need to maintain the emotions, the positive emotions and the positive outlook of someone towards me.
I see what you're saying. I just want to point out the fact that it doesn't always have to be. So when we say that, like, you're looking for your mother or your father, through a person that you find attractive, or a person that you feel attracted to, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they have to look like your mom or your dad. I think it can mean that, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. I think a lot of it has to do with the actions that these people take, or have towards you. If it's like the whole loving and caring, and I think it's like the idea of like being babied as well, or like it could be it could be an endless examples of how you can look for your mother and your father in a relationship.
I have a question now. Do you believe that in every instance, in every relationship that we will ever have, even a healthy person, like, let's not even just think about ourselves, even a healthy person is always looking for their parents' love?
Negative.
So you think that there is some form of, like, I guess, love that is different from ours. So then is our form of love incorrect, or form of, like, forming relationships incorrect?
Well, here's the thing. I'm no one to call it incorrect, right? I just think it's important to anyone who is going to make it an effort to be in a relationship to understand where that love is coming from, right? And if that love is coming from a sense of isolation or a sense of insecurity from the lack of love that you receive from your parents, it's gonna stand out in your relationship, for better or for worse. Most of the time for worse. Now, I think when we hear about adult love, that's when we understand this mature love that's strong and can stand on its own because it's independent of the love that we receive from our parents. I think starting to differentiate how love is expressed within different people in our lives and how that's affected is one of the ways in which we can start to understand why it's so important to express love the way that we do, or why sometimes the way that we express love just doesn't seem to be enough. It's not because the love isn't there. It's because of that lack of communication with you and the partner or the person who is receiving the love. Because ultimately, in order for love to be effective, it's a two-way street. It's not enough to just love somebody and expect things to work out. In order for love to be effective, both partners need to be giving and receiving love in a way that's suitable to them and that makes sense to them.
I think that ties up to why a lot of relationships nowadays are not healthy. Because a lot of times, so this could or could not be part of the reason, or could not go back to the idea that you look for your parents in a partner. But a lot of times sometimes you demand a certain type of love, or sometimes you demand your partner to express love the way that you want them to express it, you know? And one, not only is that not healthy, but two, it's a bit selfish of you to ask for that, because that doesn't necessarily mean that the person isn't showing you love. That just means that the person isn't showing you love the way that you wish they did, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. You know what I mean?
No, I definitely agree with you. I can see that in my own life in regards to my family life. I mean, my father has never been a super sentimental man in the sense that he never really expresses his love with words of affirmation or with hugs or any sort of physical affection. But one of the biggest ways in which he showed his love was through material. And nowadays, looking back, I can see why. It's because my father as a kid didn't really have much growing up in the material sense. My father, he really, really had a lot of deficiencies in his material life. And now that he has money, now that he has something material to give, he feels it's substantial. When I went to Mexico to visit my grandfather, I saw the same thing. Because my grandfather's family eats a lot. I mean a lot. And it's not because of any other reason. Then my grandfather is really, really proud to put food on the table. It's a staple to him because it indicates this is success. With food on the table, I made it, and I want to give that to my family. And I can see the same thing on my father. I remember my father was so excited to give me my first car. And he was like a little kid showing me around. It's like when you're a little kid at the playground showing other kids your Beyblades. Like it was that level of excitement just introducing the car to me. I mean, I didn't last too long because I crashed the car a couple months later. But the excitement was there nonetheless.
Motherfucker, this nigga just said that. Bro.
And the thing is, so I was able to understand my dad, and I understand when my dad is showing me love. So I can really appreciate that from him. That's why I have such a good relationship with him today. However, my sister doesn't understand when my dad is giving love. She often sees it as a cheap substitute for what she considers to be true love, which is words of affirmation and physical affection. But what my sister has to understand is that she may or may not get that from him, right? And that's what I've come to see. But my sister doesn't see it that way. My sister sees it as, well, because he's not showing me love the way that I want to feel it, that means he doesn't love me. When that isn't true. But because of that lack of communication and because of that lack of both parties giving and receiving love in the way that they wish they had it, it feels like love isn't there, even though it is.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of it is just what Abraham was saying, with like just having a lot of demands and expecting certain things to be the way that you want them to be. I feel like one important topic that you talked on was the communication, because at least for me, in my relationship with my parents and the relationship that I had with people, I never really communicated my own feelings. I never communicated how I was feeling. And I always just assumed that people began to like push me away or like didn't want to have like deep relationships with me because they didn't like me as a person. But it was just more or less just me being ignorant at the fact that I wasn't being communicative enough. I wasn't being open enough for them to be able to accept me as like someone who they want to be in a relationship with.
Yeah, I think a lot of this adds up to um, like the love languages. I feel like a lot of it has to do with, for example, the one with Lewis was like, I would consider that the love language of gifts, or like gifting something to somebody, or like giving them present. And I consider that both of my parents' love language is just giving gifts, which took me a while to understand because it was like, oh, well, you're just doing this because you want to replace, or you want to substitute your love with material things. But then when you think about it the way that you explained it, Luis, it's like, yeah, well, they didn't have that when they were younger or when they were my age, and they definitely would want me to have that. And I think that's an act of love right there. That's just love. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're trying to substitute their love or again, like I said, that they don't love you. It just means that that's their way of showing it towards you.
How do you think that lack of communication leads to a lot of broken relationships today?
I feel like it's like a combination of both, like the lack of communication and also the expectations that you have. Because, I mean, the lack of communication will always break a relationship, because if you don't communicate how you're feeling, and a lot of the times you just you have pent up anger and you don't voice that anger, you end up fucking exploding on them, or you begin to resent them, either if it's subconscious. No, most of the time it is unconscious, because you feel like the other person forced you to stay quiet, you not realizing that it was you who chose to not communicate the way that you were feeling. And a lot of the times we don't communicate the way that we're feeling because at a young age we were told that the things that we feel, the emotions that we feel, or the way that we feel they're not correct. And so we grow up never being able to develop that skill of communication, being able to communicate how we're feeling without hurting feelings.
Yeah, Melody Beattie says that really well in her book, Codependent No More. She says, say what you mean and mean what you say, but don't be mean.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about that part, is the don't be mean part, where people just think, oh, well, I'm being honest, I'm being as truthful as I can be, I'm being open. But then they end up saying like some fuck shit, bro. And I can definitely put myself in those shoes, because at some point when I began to find my voice, because I mean, before I came to the self-help group, I was a very quiet person, and I always had that belief that what I felt wasn't normal and it wasn't okay. So eventually I began to develop that skill, but I went to the other extreme, which was beginning to vocalize everything that I was thinking and forming it in a way that was just completely like disrespectful. And that was like the problems that I began to have in my relationships, where I was being like completely fucking bogus.
No, yeah, man. I was about to say, I know for a fact you're not talking about me. No way.
This guy. Well, I mean, definitely a lack of communication in a relationship will lead to the end of that relationship. And that would imply that you'd be single.
Referring back to what you had said, Abe, about how lack of communication will lead to the end of that relationship. That is not true for two people who are very, very codependent.
Oh, that's true.
So let me ask you,
That's true.
what is codependency?
What's codependency? Well, at least the way that I have come
Yes,
to
sir.
understand what codependency is either consciously or unconsciously saying that the relationship is not healthy, but you still choose to stay in that relationship because you're getting a certain benefit or a certain pleasure out of it. Or at least you're finding a comfort in that relationship, even though the other person is hurting you, or even though that the relationship is hurting you. And that sense of comfort is much more important and much more powerful than the idea that the relationship is hurting you. But what a lot of people don't know is that on the long run is when you start seeing the consequences to your codependency. See, it's easy for you to say that, it's like, and I don't mean this directly to you, Luis. I mean this in general with anybody that's a codependent. It's easy for people to say, well, oh yeah, it's like he has his flaws or she has her flaws, but like a week of straight up arguments is like a fucking month later on of just stress and frustration. I'll tell you this from experience, bro. I'll tell you this from experience. I think I've said this before. I don't consider myself being a codependent in a relationship. I think that my issue is different. I think that my issue is another. Um, my issue is not being able to stay in one relationship, which like I'll talk about later on. But that's my definition of codependency. I think it's the idea that holding on to something hurts much more than letting go.
I mean, I will say this. The most basic definition of codependency I've been able to get, and I actually differ slightly from what Melody Beatty says. I think she has a very long-winded way of saying that codependency presents itself in people who depend on other people depending on them. It's the most simple way to describe it. Ultimately, for me, who I consider myself a codependent, I find a lot of joy, a lot of pleasure in making other people feel like they need me. Nothing compares to the wanting to feel needed. And as such, fixing other people's problems is one of the simplest ways to do that. It's the reason why I like doing it so much. By fixing other people's problems, I feel like I have a certain sense of control. And with that control comes the sense of this person is never going to leave. Because ultimately, I used to think that my biggest emotional wound was through rejection. But I've kind of found out that really isn't true because my mother and my father never really rejected me at any point. I was always still their son to them. But what I did feel was a sense of abandonment. I felt a sense of abandonment when, obviously, my father got kicked out. But I also had a strong sense of abandonment when my mother, even being in the house, would just lock herself in a room and cry. And I remember very, very vividly walking into that room as a 9-year-old boy and all of a sudden just having to put on this very macho persona of like, I will take care of you. Because at this point, the way I describe this is the day that you find out that superheroes can die is possibly the saddest day on earth. And to me, that day was on a Saturday night. Well, it was Sunday morning technically. And I was sitting in my bed. My father had just confessed to me that he committed adultery. Now, to a 9-year-old boy, it doesn't really mean much apart from the fact that my dad, the person who I admired so much, messed up. And so now, I can't admire him in the same way. I thought my superhero, my idol, got torn down. And so now I had to do everything in my power to take all the lessons that he had given me and apply those so now that I could become the man of the house. And so seeing my mother sitting in her bed, crying day after day for a man who clearly didn't love her enough, it was tough. And I remember there was a couple occasions in which I would enter the room and we'd talk about what was happening. And there'd be a couple tears falling down from my eye. And even then, something told me, no, you're not allowed to cry. And so I'd wipe the tears away and I'd just tell my mother, sorry, there's something stuck in my eyes. And I remember her hugging me and crying and saying, it's okay. to feel sad. And you see, that right there is where I felt something that I didn't know I needed and I didn't know I longed for. It was just a simple hug and embrace from my mother, a caring mother that said, I am here for you. But because it's so difficult to ask for that, out of fear that they'll abandon me again or out of fear that they'll leave me, it's a lot simpler to just say, I am here for you. Me personally, me, Luis, I am here for you, and I'm not going to leave. Because if I don't leave, that means you won't leave either.
I see what you're saying. Would you say that that kind of falls into what I was talking about earlier about trying to find or having a certain sense of pleasure in the relationship that keeps you there?
Most certainly. In a lot of ways, I've come to realize that I like to suffer because somewhere in my head, I think that that's going to help the other person. If I'm suffering, then it means the other person won't suffer as much. Basically, I'm going to live the pain for them so that they don't have to do it. And in a certain sense, I derive the pleasure not because of the pain itself, but because of what the outcome is. By me feeling the pain, it means that I can just close myself up, I can bottle that up, and now all of a sudden I have fixed their problems. The pleasure comes from understanding that no matter what they throw at me, all I have to do is just sit there, stay quiet, accept it like a good little boy. And at the end of the day, if they got their rage out, that's fine. Doesn't matter what Hoofer Wilzer said. It doesn't matter what actions took place. So long as they're okay, that means I'm okay.
Ah. See, I never really saw it that way. Okay. Well, at least I never really tied it up. I could see that happening in a relationship, but I never really thought about it happening or having to do something with how it would happen at home when you were a child. I see. See, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this past weekend, I wrote another 4th and 5th step inventory. And one of the things that I took away the most was that I was able to vividly see how my resentment with my mother was currently playing out. Because whether I like to see it or not, I like to go for girls that I consider to be intellectually inferior to me. And I already know that I'm going to risk sounding like a total misogynist. I'm going to risk sounding like a bigot. I'm going to risk sounding like the biggest asshole on the planet. But I know that there's a few of you out there that can relate to what I'm saying. I find myself gravitating towards people who are younger, who are innocent, and who I consider to be intellectually inferior to me.
You mean
Why?
stupid?
Because of a sense of control.
You mean stupid?
Yes. I mean stupid, okay?
Okay.
Who I consider to be stupid. Because ultimately that gives me a sense of control that I desire. Because when I was taking care of my mother, very deep down in my rationale, I always thought, my mother's dumb. Why can't she get herself out of this position? My mother's dumb. Because I always looked up to my father. Even after he fucked up, my father was still my father. He was my idol. He was my best friend. He was everything for me. But my mother wasn't. I saw her so broken that it's... When you see someone that broken and that vulnerable, it's very, very difficult to see them how you saw them originally. And so I was never able to shake that image out of my head of my mother being so helpless that ultimately that's what I related it to. If my mother's that helpless and that dumb, then what can I expect out of anyone else? And so that's what I found myself doing in relationships. Just finding people who were helpless, who were vulnerable, who were insecure, just so that I could be the one to go up to them, pull them out of their misery, but in turn, then break them down, only so they could know that the only way back up is through me.
It's
through me. I bet he rolls his index finger to the sky. It's through me.
I did.
Hey, high key, bro. High key, if you think about it, you could talk all you want, and you could call them stupid all you want, bro, because these girls out here are so stupid, they won't even know that you're calling them stupid. So you can call them stupid all you want without having to worry about them understanding. I'm just playing, bro. I'm sorry.
I'm already getting canceled for what I've said.
Yeah, you're getting
bro.
canceled, bud.
You need to leave.
It's muddy waters. Have either of you ever experienced or elicited verbal or emotional abuse in a relationship?
Yeah, yeah, physical too.
You want to tell me about it?
You actually want me to tell you how I hit a bitch? well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. I was gonna say it, but I think that it kind of already falls into what you were saying because the way that I would explain it would just be slightly different, but at the end of the day, I think it's the same thing. It's just the idea that like I can do whatever the fuck I want with my life, and I can continue to pretend to be a playboy and a player, and I can continue to act single, and I know that I can take advantage of a girl's codependency towards me. Not that I'm codependent towards them, but I know that if I go, okay, maybe I could explain it this way. Maybe I could explain that I look for girls who have daddy issues. And, well, I mean, if you want to keep this in there, when you're in recovery, you understand things differently and you start seeing that you can use the things that you learn in recovery for good, but also for bad. And what do I mean by this? It's like you understand people's wounds, their deepest wounds. And when you're able to understand that, you can either help them stand back up on their feet and help them recover, or you can take advantage of that, which is often what I do. See, I would look for girls who had daddy issues. You know, that's what people call it now. You know, that daddy issues. Kind of also goes back to, well, the Oedipus complex and how girls look for their father in relationships. And so the idea of looking for a girl who never had a father figure in her life puts me in a position where I can fit right into that. And I could be that. I can be that person. And that doesn't mean I have to act like daddy. That just means I have to show them affection. I have to show them love. I have to give them attention. I have to give them things that were supposed to be given by her father, but, well, obviously weren't. And so by me doing that, I have filled a void that has been there for years and years and years. And throughout all of those years, that void has always been there, and it has always like just harmed them, you know, just like affect them as time went by, you know, because when you start growing older and you start realizing and seeing how other people have what you don't have, and how when you start thinking about how things could have been differently if you had a father in your life, you know, when you start seeing those things, you begin to want to have that. You know what I mean? And so that's where Abe comes in, and I'll just play that role for a few months, you know, and then as soon as I'm ready to leave, as soon as I'm like, okay, you know, I threw the hook, and you're hooked. Now I can go out and do whatever I want with my life, and I know that you're gonna stay because I gave you what nobody has given you in your entire life, and that is something that you are willing to have, even though I might hurt you because I lied to you, and that's definitely gonna hurt you because you'll feel betrayed because of all the lies that I told you when we started dating. You know, I know I'll hurt you, but even then you'll stay because, like I said, the idea of you having a father figure in me is much more pleasant than your betrayal wound or the idea that I betrayed you. And so you'll stay there. You'll stay there for as long as I want to. Shit, if I wanted to, I could have you for the rest of my life. And you could or could not know that, but you'll still stay there. I could do that with several girls, you know? And at the end of the day, it's like a person like that, you'll see as somebody who's like, oh, that's a player, you know? Or, oh, you know, that's a fuck boy, you know? Or you just fuck around with the girls and you sleep with them, and then, you know, you just have fun and use girl after girl after girl. But I think it goes deeper than that, you know. And I not only deeper, I think that's dark. I think understanding the way that you can manipulate people through their most vulnerable um, parts of them, emotionally speaking, that's just dark. That's dark. The way that you can use that for your own benefit, that's dark. And I think that's toxic. And I think that's the way that I could project my toxicity in a relationship.
How do you think hookup culture plays into it?
Well, I'll tell you this. I could go through the situationship route, or I could go through the fuckboy route. I have experienced both. So the majority of everything that I just talked about has just been experiences that I've had. And the way that I'm going to answer this question is by experiences that I have had. But I'll take the fuckboy route, because I think that'll make a little more sense. Because a situationship is different than just hooking up. A situationship isn't quite friends with benefits, but it's not quite a relationship either. It's just like there's something there, but it's not there. It's just very, very incongruent. However, being a fuckboy just means that you just go around and sleeping with anybody. And I think that, at least for me, the way that it worked was, or it had a lot to do with what you were speaking earlier. I feel like that a lot of my behavior as what can be considered a fuckboy had a lot to do with the sense of abandonment that I felt from my mother growing up. And I certainly agree with the way that you explained how, even though your mom didn't literally abandon you, you still felt abandoned, or you still felt a sense of abandonment from her. I certainly agree with that because that was something that I experienced. I think I've always said it. Both of my parents always lived under the same roof. However, it didn't feel that way. I felt abandoned by both of my parents. And the way that I go on about my sexual life and my relationships has a lot to do with the abandonment that I felt from my mother. Why? Because that created a void inside of me. I call it a void now, but back then it was just like, I would say it was like a hole in my chest that just like, it didn't matter what I would do. It didn't matter how many girls I dated. It was never filled up. And so I think that a lot of the things that I personally did and the people that I slept with, like the girls that I slept with, it had a lot to do with trying to fill that void and not being hurt at the same time. So the idea of sleeping around with girls instead of having one relationship was much more comfortable than the idea of having a relationship and risking getting hurt or abandoned or betrayed. So the idea of like being hurt by a woman, it would just get me furious, bro. It would get me so angry because I remember feeling stupid when I would get hurt by my mother. Whether it was physically, emotionally, or verbally, it just felt stupid to me. And that later on is projected in my life, and I will refuse. I refuse to get hurt. I refuse to feel hurt by a girl. So I had to play on this this role of being a fuckboy, if that's what you want to call it. But inside of my head, it was like, by all means, I'll do whatever I have to do in order for me not to get hurt by you. And if that implies that I I just have to use you, then so be it. If that implies that I have to play you, then so be it. I have this void and I have tried to fill this void with sex and it clearly hasn't worked. But I'm also not going to allow myself to get hurt again. Technically, with this point of view, I disprove my insecurity because at the end of the day, to me, that's what it is. It's just an insecurity. And so, in order for me to not show my insecurity, I decide to hurt other people. But let's suppose that I do all the things that I do because I fear putting my trust in somebody else, right? I think that a lot of it adds up to that. Just me refusing to trust my partner or trust a girl in a relationship. And so I feel like if I never really allow myself to trust somebody else, I feel like I'm not living. I feel like making mistakes and getting hurt is part of life. I dare say it's something that on the long run you'll enjoy because it'll help you grow as a person. And not only that, the idea that you don't know or you're not certain that even if you do trust somebody, that person will or will not hurt you, just having that uncertainty makes life interesting or makes the whole idea of a relationship interesting to me.
I feel like I could relate somewhat to what Abraham said, in the sense that I absolutely dislike the idea of someone like hurting me, because it did happen to me in my first relationship. Like, I got completely shit on. It was a whole fuck ton of things where she got together with one of my friends. And after that situation, like, I swore to myself, I'm never going to get fucking her. I am never going to get fucking her. And for a while, I didn't get into a relationship, or I didn't even think of a relationship. In fact, I haven't been in a relationship since then. And it's been mostly because I remember in high school, I had people who did like me. And I even then, I still was like kind of confused because, I mean, I had low self-esteem and I was really insecure about myself. And I was like, how they're probably just lying or some shit. But nonetheless, I like the idea of someone liking me. And even now, that's true. Even now, it's true that I like the idea of someone liking me. Not because I want a relationship with them, or not because I'm attracted to them. It's just because it feeds my ego. It feeds my ego completely. And it makes me feel superior. It makes me feel good about myself. And when I feel that disconnection, that's where my codependency comes in. And I kind of want to do whatever is possible to have them continue to like me. Not because I want a relationship with them. It's simply just because I like the feeling of being liked. And I feel like another question that I always ask myself whenever I think about like relationships and stuff, I always ask myself, why haven't I been in a relationship? And I feel like, for me, my understanding of what a relationship is exhausting. Because I feel like, I don't like the idea. I've enjoyed being single to a certain extent. Not completely, because I still have FOMO. I feel like FOMO also exists a lot, like the fear of missing out and like seeing other people being in relationships and stuff. But the actual idea of being in a relationship and the responsibility that I feel like it entails, it's not attractive to me. So for me, like, whenever I think of a relationship, I always think of like arguments. And I know that that's from my own fucked up understanding of what relationships is, but I always associate it with arguing with somebody or having to be with somebody constantly and just being around them all the time. And for me, like, being single for how long I've been in, I don't like I've enjoyed being alone. Like, anytime that I'm driving with somebody, and if it's just one-on-one, like, I completely like disassociate. And I'm not even there anymore. I'm not even aware of, like, I don't want to talk with anybody in that moment. Like, I'm just in my head thinking about some shit, or I'm listening to music. And so, like, for me to get out of that position is kind of difficult. Because, I'm not going to lie, I do want to get in a relationship. Or, I don't even know if I do want to get in a relationship. Because, I don't know. I haven't been able to separate that part of, like, is it just me just having FOMO? Or is it me actually wanting to go out there and get into a relationship?
I think it has a lot to do with solitude. And solitude in a good way. Shit, hearing all of us talk definitely wants me to believe that we should all just be single, bro. We should not go out there right now, bro. We should just stay single.
No, yeah, definitely. Because, at least for me, I want to know who I am. I've experienced my codependency in a way where I don't feel my codependency with a specific person. It's more just with everybody, like society. Like, I want to be seen as just like a person who is attractive, a person who people enjoy being around. And so for me, I feel like that kind of like fucks me up because I haven't been able to solidify my identity. I haven't been able to find my own personality, or like a solid personality, like a person that I genuinely am. Like I want to discover who I am, and I know I haven't discovered myself enough for me to want to go into a relationship. But then here's a question to you guys. Do you believe that you need to be ready to be in a relationship?
I think that there's certain things that I consider that you should have in order for the relationship to function or to be effective, I guess, or it to be healthy. But I wouldn't necessarily say you have to be ready. At least for me. At least for me. I first want to address what you said about like the idea of somebody liking you, filling up your ego, or feeding your ego, because that's just so true. Like I could see that in my life. Like it's just like I do remember, and till this day, like there's certain people that I know for sure find me attractive, but I know I don't want to date them. Although I do like the fact
Mm-hmm.
that they find me attractive, and that just like yeah, but that just feels good, you know. It's just like, and even like the idea of like that just being a sense of them feeling attracted towards me and nothing else, like that just being that feels good. You know, it's like it's the attention. It's the fucking attention, you know what I mean? And I'll definitely like I'll grow balls out of nowhere, bro, and I'll set a fucking boundary. Like
Exactly.
when if there were ever to be a girl who would like try to come up to me and like start a conversation or ask for my number or just tell me whatever that she finds me attractive, I would definitely set up a boundary because I know I've done it before, and I don't care about being rude about it either. Like I'll be rude about it, and dead ass I'll just be like no bitch, and then just walk away. But I don't know. I feel like that has to do with something else. But I did want to say that does happen to me too. I do feel that way too.
To answer your question about what you said about do you feel like you need to be ready for a relationship, I would go ahead and pitch no. I think so. While being ready, quote unquote, will definitely help, what Horatio Jones says in his book "I Am the Love of My Life" is that a lot of the times stuff is gonna just come. It's gonna fall in your lap, right? Wait, hold up. Pause.
Come.
Pause. But no, a lot of those times.
You have to leave this in. You have to leave this in.
I will. I promise
Nah,
I will.
bro. Nah, bro.
But
Wait,
yeah,
wait,
a lot
hold
of
on, hold on.
times. What?
I'm gonna take a piss. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Listen.
All right, I'm back.
Yeah, but yeah, what Horatio Jones says. A lot of the time, stuff will just fall on your lap. Situations will present themselves, and you can't really just turn them down.
Okay, my bad.
As I was saying, a lot of times.
Okay, last time, bro. Last time. My bad. Trevor.
Anyways, a lot of times situations just present themselves, and you can't really just like turn them down. I mean, I guess you can, but then there exists that sense of FOMO, like Flavio was talking about, the fear of missing out. But this time it's genuine because you could legitimately be throwing away something that would actually help you. And so, in your search for love or for self-love, why would you reject the love that people are giving you willingly? Right? It doesn't make much sense. So, while yes, it is ideal to be prepared to be in a relationship, if you're a codependent like me and you're expecting to not enter a relationship until you have faced your own problems and you stop being codependent, guess what? You're never gonna get in a relationship. I mean, there's no other way of putting it, right? Like, if you expect perfection from your relationship, it's not gonna happen. So, putting this boundary of I need to be ready for it is going to limit you in the long run.
Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely. I feel like I would give a similar answer. Except for, like, having an identity is also really important before you go into a relationship. Because if you don't know who you are, if you don't understand who you are completely, maybe not completely, because obviously knowing yourself 100% takes a really long time. I feel like, not to say like I don't know how much time, but it takes a lot of fucking time. But like enough to have like a concrete base of understanding of who you are. Because I feel like that's when you don't know who you are, you can easily be manipulated, very easily. Because you're really just going off on a life of just living off of other people's emotions.
Shit, man, I know you're not talking about me.
I think he's talking about you. I think he's he's definitely talking about you, Lucas. No, I'm just playing.
Well, one of the biggest things that I find about singleness is, well, within the book, Single, Dating, Engaged, Married, what Ben Stewart likes to say is that singleness has a purpose. And as of late, the most recent book that I've read is Single on Purpose by John Kim. You may know him as The Angry Therapist, but the book basically talks about how when you're single, you're still in a relationship, but you're in a relationship with yourself. And that makes sense. However, I'll talk about that a little bit later. What I want to talk about is why be single? Like, what is the purpose in being single? And what Ben Stewart does is he does a case study on a biblical figure, Apostle Paul. Because Apostle Paul said something that to me at the time was like, how the fuck would anyone ever say that willingly and mean it? He said that those who are single should count it a blessing. And I was like, there's no way, bro. Like, there's no way. I'm over here resented at the fact that I have a girlfriend, but at the same time, I'd rather be in this shitty relationship than be alone, right? And yet, he said, being single is a blessing because it allows you to focus all that time and energy that you would otherwise be spending in your relationship into yourself and your mission, which, for me as a Christian, is the betterment or the fulfillment, how can I put it, is the Great Commission, right? Is continuing to do God's will in my life and ensuring that other people can hear that message too. However, when it came to Apostle Paul, there was a few different ways in which Apostle Paul avoided feeling lonely. And one of the biggest ways is that he just had really good friends. Like, he had friends that he was willing to die for and that they were willing to die for him. And I think, in a certain sense, the reason why I felt so lonely is not because I didn't have friends. It's because I closed myself off to the idea of having friends in favor of a romantic relationship. And that screwed me over severely. Because as soon as I got into my relationship, I automatically stopped hanging out with my friends. I stopped talking to them. I stopped texting them. I stopped calling them. And I started noticing that all of it, I was putting towards my girlfriend. And here's the thing, putting all your eggs in one basket just means that when someone inevitably comes and takes your fucking basket, or like, Swiper swipes your nuts, it's game over, bro. It's game over. Like, at that point, you lost everything that you were working towards. And so because your identity was built upon that relationship and upon that person, you feel lost. At least that's how I felt. I felt lost. And it was because there was no sense of mission. There was no sense of urgency. There was nothing that grounded me. However, Apostle Paul says, get good friends, focus on yourself, and continue to learn, right? Because Apostle Paul, even when he was sentenced to death and nobody showed up to his hearing, he still didn't resent his friends. He was still there for them, and he still cared for them. And to me, there is nothing greater, there's nothing more appealing than being a friend like that. And honestly, it's not something that I come to find until I came to a self-help group. And very, very recently, might I add, we were supporting a 4th or 5th step experience, and I gave myself the task of just expressing gratitude. And to me, what I would come to find is that expressing gratitude was the hardest thing I possibly could have done, because someone as prideful as me, who believes that he's superior to everybody else around him, It's very, very difficult to express gratitude or to say thank you to people who you consider below you. And yet that's what I was doing. Because in my head, I was like, everybody here is lower than me on an intellectual and on an emotional level. I had to humble myself and come to realize that the only way for me to stop feeling lonely is to start feeling and accepting the love that people were offering me. And it's hard because, quite honestly, love is scary, but apart from being scary, love hurts. It hurts. I can't tell you just the uneasiness that I feel when I accept love. And I think that's why I avoid it for so long, is because I know what it's like to be loved. And I don't like it in a certain sense. I say that I want it, but at the same time, it's a lot of responsibility and it's a lot to handle. But what I learned from being single is that you can manifest that love in different ways, apart from just a romantic relationship, and it gives you a purpose for that love.
Yeah, I think my case is very similar because it took me a while to actually differentiate between being alone and feeling alone. And I didn't even understand those were two very different things because they sound very similar, but they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely. I think that the moment that you find comfort in your solitude is the moment that you could probably consider as being ready for a relationship. But I did want to just add into that when I said that there's certain things that make your relationship a little, well, more effective, I guess. And I can't find the right word. I know effective is not the word, but it's just like what I'm trying to say is that, for example, one of them is money. Okay, one of them is money. I'm not trying to say that either or has to be a fucking gold digger, or your boyfriend's a gold digger or your girlfriend's a gold digger. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that you guys would agree with me when I say that you wouldn't want to date if you were broke, bro. I feel like I don't want to say that going out on dates is necessary, but it is necessary to spend time together. And that implies that you might have to drive around, which implies that you need gas money, which implies that, well, you're not going to just chill in the car unless you're going to fuck. But I think that a relationship is more than just sex.
I feel like what Lewis said was really, really big, really, really powerful, and I've already understood that, but the way that he put it, the way that he phrased it was really good, in the sense that when you are single, you're still in a relationship, but you're in a relationship with yourself. And for me, it took me a long time, and I would say that just now, just recently, probably a month ago, that's what I realized. Because when I was in high school, I was always told why aren't you in a relationship? Why aren't you in a relationship? And every single time that I was asked that by anybody, whether it was my friends, my parents, I would always answer well, I'm just working on myself. I'm just working on myself. I'm trying to find myself type shit. And in reality, it was just bullshit because, I was just afraid of going into a relationship because I had a lot of insecurities, because I had really low self-esteem, and I didn't think that I would be loved. I didn't think I was worthy of love. But I never did. At the time, I didn't have the tools to be able to understand that. Or I think I understood it, but I just didn't know how to fix it. And so I never was able to obtain the tools. And even having the tools, even after I got into the self-help group and I discovered myself, I never really opened up truthfully. And I never understood how to be open in relationships. Because even with myself, I was never open. I would deceive myself a lot. I would lie to myself and tell myself that everything was okay with me, that I was confident in myself, that I was doing things because of whatever reason, that I was... For example, one of them was a big thing was I was going to the gym to feel good about myself. When in reality, I was just trying to be seen as a more attractive person. I thought that it would make me more attractive. And that's just one example of many of how I would deceive myself. And ultimately, I didn't know who I was. And I would argue that now I understand who I am, and I'm having a better understanding of that. I don't remember when the switch just flicked off of understanding that I need to be more open with people. and not only with other people but myself as well. But as soon as that switch turned on, like I feel a lot more deeper connections. And it's almost like a drug because like I feel like I want to talk to people more. I feel like I want to be open to people more. And I know that it hasn't gotten to a point where I wanted to. Like I haven't been able to open up with a lot of people close to me in the way that I wanted to. But it's been a lot better. And that growth that I've been seeing is like enjoyable. And I know that I'm on the path towards that. And I feel like that's an important thing to realize, that in reality, being single isn't a bad thing as long as you are working with yourself and like you're actually working with yourself, not just lying to yourself, and really like searching and trying to better yourself.
Oh, that's raw. Yeah, that's raw. That's raw as fuck.
Switching gears a little bit. I don't have an Urban Dictionary in hand, but can you define what you mean by situationships?
A situationship is also something that took me uh, a while to understand. It took me a lot of reading to understand as well, because I often confused a situationship with friends with benefits, because it kind of sounds the same. As you may recall earlier, I was talking about how a situationship is not quite a relationship, but is not quite friends with benefits. There's a lot of incongruence in a situationship because you don't know what you want. Sometimes you don't even know why you're there. You're there and you probably have an idea as to why you're still sticking around, but not quite. And you also don't really know if you're ready to leave. You don't know if you like want to stay single and keep it going like that, or you would actually want to have something with that person. There's just a lot of confusion in a situationship. It could go on for fucking years, and if you're not conscious about it, you're just hurting yourself and you're hurting the other person. Did that make sense?
Yeah, bro, that hits home. That hits home. There's only one girl that I've ever kissed that wasn't my girlfriend. And to be honest, I told myself before it happened that I was going to regret it. And regret it I did, man. Look, we'll go ahead and call her Emily for now, okay? Now, Emily is I met her when she was 15. Sweet little girl. And the thing is, after some time, I just felt like a mentor for her, right? I just felt like she's a little girl who looks up to me. She doesn't actually love me. She just has a crush on me, like celebrity status sort of thing. That's how I saw myself. I don't even know how I can talk with my cock so firmly down my throat, but I mean, yeah, that's the way I saw it.
Sorry, bro. Sorry. You gotta add in the sound effects, man.
Sound
you gotta
effects,
add
yeah,
sound effects. Okay.
But yeah, that's the way I saw it. And so eventually, when she came back into my life, what I found is that Emily was still persistent, man. Like she still would invite me to stuff, and I could still tell that she had a thing for me. And I never pursued it because, well, for one, was the fear that she would leave. But if I was being honest with myself, it was the fear of missing out. Not the fear of missing out on a relationship, the fear of missing out on something potentially better. And I never wanted to admit that because how am I going to tell her that I'm scared that I'm going to miss out on someone better than her? Like, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. And I felt like an asshole saying that or even thinking that. But it was true. Nonetheless, it was true. And so I remember where I would be in these situations where I'd be talking to this girl or I'd be, trying to get this thing. And I would talk to her about it, but I would never say names and I would never give specifics because I didn't want her to think that the door was closed. I always wanted that door open just in case there came the day that I was desperate enough to be with her. And that day came because eventually I got tired of just being her friend and something told me, like, I remember I saw her snuggled up against one of her friends and I said, I'd rather you put your head on my shoulder. And as soon as I said that to myself, I was like, And so eventually I pursued it, and things were nice for about a week. Things were nice until they weren't. And what I found is that because I had violated my own boundaries, I really put myself in a position where I was now obsessing over this girl that I wasn't even in a relationship with. I was obsessing over somebody who I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to be with her. I didn't know if I wanted to fuck her. Actually, I probably did know, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. And I didn't want to risk breaking our friendship. But because of my insecurity and because of my lack of decisiveness, because of my indecisiveness, and because of this perverse desire to always twist things around to make myself look like the good guy, I lost what was a really good friend, a relationship that really, really impacted me and that I really cared about. And in return, I got a deep obsession over a girl that I was never even dating. That shit hurts, man. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, sounds like it hurts, bro. You can cry if you want to.
Not on the podcast, bro. Not on the podcast.
Come on, bro. We moaned. We gotta cry now, bro. I moaned. You gotta cry. I do the moaning. You do the crying. Yeah.
I broke up earlier when I was talking about my mom.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so lastly, I already know there's going to be some people listening to this podcast that are thinking, okay, all this is great, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm fucked up. And you know what? To you, I hear you, and I couldn't agree more. So I'd like to spend these last couple of minutes just talking about a couple of the different ways in which all three of us have found to practice self-love. Like what actually helps. Because here's the thing about self-love is that people don't really tell you how to love yourself. They just say, well, in order to have a good relationship, you have to love yourself. It's like, bitch, look, if it was that simple, trust me, I would have fucking done it by now. Alright? If someone taught me how to love myself, I would have done it by now. So why don't you tell me what that actually looks like? And I'm not going to go ahead and tell you to do all this self-care bullshit that you see online. All of the, the lighting of the candles and lighting of the incense and making yourself a nice bath and, treating yourself to essential oils and shit like that. Look, it's superficial as fuck. It's draining your money. It's not doing anything for your consciousness. It's not doing anything for your emotional stability. It is not making you a better person. You are just playing into placebos, all right? And I'm going to keep it a buck with you. Stop being fucking stupid, all right? Now, if you want to not be stupid, let's talk about a couple of ways in which we can practice self-love. I think one of the biggest ways that I have found this is when you're eating alone, because it's going to happen eventually. For me personally, I hated eating alone. Every time I would go to the chow hall, I wanted to make sure I had somebody there with me. Because if I was eating alone, it was just uncomfortable. And guess what? I can't listen to music when I'm in uniform, so it was just sitting there listening to my own fucking thoughts, and I didn't like it. So anytime I was eating alone and I had the chance to put headphones on, I would. Now, what I've found is if I'm eating alone, take the headphones off. Don't listen to music. Don't listen to a podcast. Sit there with your thoughts and the silence. Because you're going to start finding things. And a lot of times you're not going to like it. That's why we listen to music. It's to drown out the voices in our head. But if you start listening to them and accepting them, you'll start seeing what you like and what you don't like. Ultimately, self-love it's loving yourself in the way that you wish other people would love you. But instead of waiting for other people to love you, you do it to yourself. Right? And if there's things about yourself that you want to change, well, then fucking change them. Right? If that's going to make you love yourself more, then change them. It's important. And part of it is listening to your own thoughts. Part of it is sitting in silence. If you can get comfortable with the thoughts in your head, and there's going to be nothing that startles you.
Yeah, I feel like self-love is like a difficult thing. Right? It was a difficult thing for me. Ever since I lived the same fourth and fifth inventory or whatever that you lived, I feel like I discovered that the best way that I can show my self-love is by understanding who I am. and understanding like everything about me, including like the bad parts. A lot of the times I chose to see only the negatives. I chose to see all the bad things about me, that I was my appearance, that I was awkward a lot of the times, that I didn't know how to socialize with people. And it wasn't until I lived whatever I lived that I began to realize that I had a lot of positive things about me. One of the biggest things was my creativity, like understanding that I was as creative as ever. Like I used to love drawing as a kid, but I had lost that over the years. Mostly because it was easier for me to go play video games and shit. But I also discovered that I knew how to draw, and that I enjoyed drawing, that I enjoyed just sitting down and coloring. Recently I invested in like a little, or actually I didn't invest it. It was a gift from my mom. She bought me this little sketchbook, and I've been drawing in that bitch. And honestly, the moments that I have of just drawing in there and listening to music, turning on the candle, those are the moments that in some way, in some form of action, I tell myself that I love myself. And like I mentioned before, like going to the gym was one of the things that, I discovered that I was doing it for the bad reasons. And it wasn't until like I just switched it off and I told myself like I have nothing to prove to anybody, and that I'm going to do this because I want to continue to grow as a person, and I want to push myself out of my comfort zone. Because in reality, it does push me out of my comfort zone. Going to the gym pushes me out of my comfort zone. Because sometimes there's days where like I don't want to go anymore, but being disciplined enough and telling myself I'm going to do this because I care about myself, I care about my health, and I care about my goals. It's a way that I tell myself, yeah, I do love myself. And it's a constant reminder of that.
Yeah, I fuck with that. I really fuck with that. First, I had to accept who I was. Because a lot of times, going back to what you were saying, Luis, about, oh, well, how am I supposed to learn to love myself? Or how am I supposed to start learning to love myself? Well, I'll tell you this. You can't love yourself if you don't know who you are. Or you can't love yourself if you don't like what you see in the mirror. But that's the thing, self-love is much more than just what you see in the mirror. It actually took me a while to start doing things and start, putting action into my life, because I feel like I wasn't a very insecure guy, I'm not saying I don't have insecurity. I'm not saying I didn't allow insecurities to really, really affect the way that I saw myself once upon a time. But I will say that I wasn't insecure enough to actually put action into my life. I'll tell you this. Somebody who is very, very fat has been very, very humiliated and is very, very insecure, And so that could potentially push them to getting a gym membership and working their ass off till they lose that weight and are actually satisfied with the way that they physically look. But you see, how would you deal with that if you are okay with how you look? If you do feel secure? Because I will tell you that sometimes I did look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, damn, I wish I was a little prettier. But then there are also times where I looked at myself in the mirror and I'm like, God damn, bro, like, I'm fucking fine, nigga. I can pull, bro. Like there was a sense of
Risen yourself up.
Yeah, I was like rising myself up, and there was like a sense of confidence in me that, like, it just it was like it didn't really let me just fall into the conclusion that I was insecure. But I will say acceptance was still necessary in my life. I still needed to accept who I really was, because for me, accepting was like, okay, this is where we're gonna start, and then set myself goals, and this is where I want to be at. I will say though, I see what you're saying, but I will say though, keep track of your hygiene in general. I think that is necessary in order for you to, like, I think that just adds up to the idea of having self-love, just don't let that little caquita in your asshole dry up. Don't let your armpits start smelling like dirty pussy. Just take care of yourself physically. Do your hair, fucking shower every day. And I think that will definitely give you that boost, because think about it. When you start taking care of yourself, you start liking what you see more, and that just goes with the physical. I think that in order for you to start loving yourself, you got to start letting, like, allowing yourself to get to know yourself and what you like and what you don't like. And for me, what I can tell you is that I definitely really enjoy reading. That's something that I really, really like to do. I started going to the gym, and that's also something I really, really like to do because I know that it's not only healthy for me, but I also enjoy doing that. Another thing is photography, seeing you, Lewis, with that camera that you always bring, that's something that I would definitely enjoy doing. I feel like it could even get to a level where your love for yourself is much more powerful than the love that you could get out of a relationship, that you wouldn't mind not being in a relationship, or you wouldn't mind being in a relationship and having to end it. I think that in a relationship, you just, both of you guys have to make you happy. So both Emily and Lewis have to make Lewis happy, and both Emily and Lewis have to make Emily happy. Yeah, I think it goes both ways. And on top of that, I think it's a compromise that you both have.
I feel like my last remark would be something big that I learned today, which is when you're in a relationship with yourself and you truly understand yourself and you truly discover yourself and you do the best that you can while you're in that relationship with yourself, you are then becoming prepared to be in a relationship with someone else.
Yep.
I feel like that goes back to like something that I discovered in the self-help group, which was, if you don't practice the things that you learn with yourself first, if you don't treat yourself the way that you want to treat others first, then you're not going to be able to reciprocate what you want to give out. And I feel like that's something big that I discovered today. Thanks to you guys.
Well, if you've gotten to the end of this podcast, we'd like to thank you for your time. Also, if you have made it this far, go ahead and leave a like if you did like the video. If you didn't, then let us know why you didn't in the comments below. Or just any other remarks that will help us improve the quality of these podcasts. We've had a lot of fun doing them, and we plan to continue doing them in the future. We also have a lot of plans and aspirations and ideas for what we'd like to do in the future. So if you have any of those ideas, also let us know. That way we can start formulating some of them to make sure that they happen. Otherwise, you already know what to do. You've been on the internet for long enough. Share it, like it, send it to people, let other people know that we exist. And hopefully in the future, this will continue to grow and we can make even better content. Until now, this has been the Celestial Cafe. Thank you for listening. Have a good one.
Grazie. Bangers. That's some bangers.